This conference will now be recorded.
Sweetwater, Texas. It's Monday, August the 17th, 2020, 10:03 a.m. Ken, will you please open us with a prayer?
Please bow with me in prayer. And dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to be here today. We thank you for the guidance you give us. Help us understand what's going on with the COVID and help us do our part to make sure that we keep our community and family safe. Give us strength to make the right decisions, and as stewards of the sales tax funds for our community, help us direct them to be the best use in Sweetwater, Texas. We pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Ken. Item 3, public comments and receipt of petitions. At this time, anyone will be allowed to speak on any matter other than personnel matters or matters under litigation for a length of time not to exceed 3 minutes. No board discussion or action may take place on a matter until such matter has been placed on an agenda and posted in accordance with law. Are there any comments? Okay, so we'll start with our action items. Number 4A, board to review and consider approving the minutes of the July 28th, 2020 meeting.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, it is moved and seconded that the minutes of the July 28th, 2020 meeting be approved. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is carried. We'll go to action item 4B, board to review and consider approving payment of accounts payable.
We're going to ask that we move that to a later time in the meeting.
Thank you. Okay, and it's okay to go to 4C?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Board to review and consider approving the June 2020 financial statements.
There isn't much out of the ordinary on here. The only incentive payment you'll see coming out of our designated funds was to Paydex for their apartments. Our sales tax are actually up 7.81% compared to last year. Not a lot to point out on the income statement. We're all fairly within the budget except for a lot of stuff that we pay up front, such as rent and our administration fee to the city. You'll see on our fund balance, the only thing to really point out with our Paydex incentive payment. Ken, did you have an update for Christian?
Yeah, just kind of give you a quick update. 7/31/2020, Dent Trucking. He's reduced that debt down to $208,000, and that was about $450 at one time.
208. Okay, thanks.
That's 731.
We have a guarantee loan for $300,000. For our sales tax, like I said, 7.81% up this month, and you'll even see that grayed out our next month's allocation. We're up as well.
So if you really look at that over the last 12 months receiving, including what we're showing for next, we've only had one decline in 11 positive months.
And then our unemployment's doing good. We're, I guess, decreased in all of our non-surrounding counties except for Fisher. They increased just a tiny bit over the last month, but we're still all below the Texas average and the US average. So we're doing good there.
That's good.
That's all I have unless there's any questions.
I move that we approve the financial statements as presented.
Second.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded that we approve the June 2020 financial statements. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is carried. Okay, so, okay, to go to D.
Yes.
Okay. Board to review and consider approving resolution 2020-002 in regards to funding asbestos abatement and asbestos consulting for abatements.
What we'd really like to do is talk about D and E at the same time, because we don't really want to have one approved if you don't have all the information to go into the second one.
Okay.
And Dana's here can help us answer any questions as needed. Dana's done a good job of getting those 4 properties, got asbestos reports. Part of the issues you run into when you do that, when you run into commercial buildings, you also have to have, when you do the demolition itself, an asbestos abatement study being, not, I won't say it's a study, but on site to look at that. Sent it out for bid. There was 5 different companies that turned in bid. We're recommending that item number 3, and you should have that in part of your file, seems to be the best bid. It's not the initial cheapest, but when you look at all the things considered, they're going to take 3 of those properties and actually demolition them in place, where the others are just going to do the asbestos abatement only, and then you'd have to come back and do the demo at a later date. But that will have to be decided by the state of Texas. So what we'll be asking, and Dana again can walk you through a little bit more information if needed, that we recommend that Vanco installation be the party, because it's going to be a total of $71,695. Then you're going to have Hibbs and Todd at $21,809.50 for a total of $93,504.50 to take care of those properties. One of the properties will not be demolished. It was only going to have a asbestos abatement on that one. Is there anything I miss on that, Dana?
No, I think you covered it real well. And just to reiterate again, it's even though it's not the lowest, in the end, most likely will be the lowest if you take into account asbestos removal and demolition, and then time. It would be done quicker. What we have to do, and there's a process that we have to go to the state and get the buildings condemned. So we actually have to go through that process, an official condemnation letter presented to the state so that the contractor can demolish with asbestos in place. So it looks like these properties will certainly be condemned by the state. If not, I believe that what you're seeing for prices will remain. They'll be taking into account whether the asbestos is removed first and then demolition second. So based on my understanding of what's been presented with the bid and what Ken had explained, I think this is definitely the best bid of the 4. It's the most responsive low bid that we received.
And when you look at what the state does, so let's just assume that we approve these 2 things, move it forward. They do the condemnation, then a letter goes to the state, and if the state sends back and says no, then we wouldn't be doing that expenditure at all. We'd have to start over in another process.
Ken, Dana, which building or which structure is not going to be
I think it's
demolished?
the 3211 is my understanding. That structure will have asbestos removed first. Let me just look at, I take it back, 3307. That one is pretty much intact, and it wouldn't be considered by the contractor as an unsafe structure for their employees to get in. So the asbestos would be removed first, and then we'd have to come back in with a demolition, which would be fairly reasonable, most likely.
So it's a small building, right?
It's a small building, yeah. Both of the 2 that are on West Broadway are very small. Most of the demolition work, honestly, will be on properties on East Broadway, the old Palomino and the other ones at 1912.
Is the 3211 the one with the big tank though?
Yes.
So that'll come down. All
Yes.
of that'll
All of
come
it.
down. That'll be
It'll all come
wonderful.
down. There's a scale there too that will be removed also.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's pretty. So the small building, we'll just get a bulldozer out there and take care of it or something. Okay, great. Why aren't they taking it down? I'm just curious.
Why aren't they taking that one? Because in their opinion, they.
Oh,
feel
because
as
they
it
felt like
wouldn't
it
be-
was set.
It wouldn't be condemnable,
I got you.
in their opinion.
In their opinion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ken, what was that second number? You gave us 71,695, which is the total of Vanco.
Yes, then $21,809.50 for a total of $93,504.50. That's
Look at your tab, you have a consulting tab, and that's the bid for that one. Right there. For EHU.
And so there would be a second bid that we would have to go out for the demolition on West Broadway at a later date.
Oh,
Yes,
got it.
and as Ken mentioned too, the foundation, it doesn't include any foundation removal. And that would have to be included in the demolition bid later. Now, the old Palomino is partly pier and beam and foundation. So that won't be significantly expensive. And there's not much of a foundation, quite honestly, of those other properties. So yes, it would be a second bid that would go out for that. And with that building that they would not remove right away.
And when it comes to the foundation, the other property that got tore down across from the Spanish Army Department did not have foundation tore out with it. And that property actually is now sold. There was a contract pending. They just put up a sold sign on it middle of last week. There's somebody supposed to be putting in a business there of some kind. So even if you didn't take down the foundation, you know, it wouldn't hurt anything to be there.
In that small building as well, it wouldn't
Right.
hurt to leave that.
Yes.
I mean, you can knock that down without any trouble.
But, you know, one of the things we like is and Dana's done a great job of making sure we're on the corridor and getting one of the main structures we've talked about in Palomino Hotel for a long time. That's included in here. And then the other two are what used to be Len Bowden's boot shop and stuff. And there's two buildings together down there that take care of that.
So it'll be both of those buildings.
Yes, ma'am.
Dana, this is Joseph. Real quick question regarding solicitation of these bids.
Yes.
Because number 4 did not present demolition costs, were each one of these vendors solicited similarly, or were there different requests for different types of bids?
No, it was great question, Joe. The bid packet basically said we're seeking asbestos abatement services. That could mean a lot of different things. So it could mean a company coming in and just removing asbestos and then being done with the project. It could also mean demolition with asbestos in place, because that's asbestos abatement. So the bid packet was the same for all. This one, Vanco actually came and did the inspection on the properties. The only other one that had come in and inspected the properties, I believe, was RL Abatement, and they were the high bid. So Vanco felt that they're unsafe structures. That's why they came in with their proposal to demolition with the asbestos in place. They actually came here, inspected it. That's why I believe that they're the most responsive bid of the bids that we received. But they all bid the same. All bid the same asbestos abatement.
And Joseph, just carry that a step further. Jeff's also online. We did take that to the city attorney. Pete signed off on it and gave it to Jeff, and Jeff signed off that the process used in their determination was a legal process.
Excellent. Great job, guys. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
That's why we wanted to talk about D and E, because D basically gives us the right to do it. Then E would be the one to actually confirm that we actually sign a contract with that company pending approval by the state of Texas.
Any more questions? Any more discussion?
Page 2 of the contract, top of the page. The time for the property owned should be owners, just for typo correction.
Is that on the resolution?
On the resolution, page 2.
Yes, so we have already, the one that you will sign, I've already corrected that one.
Okay.
By the time I sent these before.
Yeah, that's fine. I just want to make sure it's
Yeah,
been
I
corrected.
found the typo.
Not picking on you.
After I sent those out.
And Jeff, since you're on the line, could I pose a question to you, please, sir? Is there any liability that you see associated to the EDC or SEED as funding this project only? Is there any residual liability that we as board members need to be aware of?
Not that I see in this particular project. We're not taking ownership of anything. We don't have control over it. The city's done their due diligence and all of those sorts of things. I'm comfortable with it that we don't have anything that would be threatening to us.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
And if we do this, we might even want to put together, film a documentary on tearing down the Palomino Hotel.
Slow motion, one of those slow motion.
You might not want to just film what you found out of the Palomino.
Good point, good point.
Yeah.
Madam Chairman, based on the comments of local citizens, I move that we accept the resolution that's presented as well as action item E to move forward with the asbestos abatement associated with these 4 properties and by the bid number 3, Vanco Insulation, Inc.
Second.
Thank you. So it is moved and seconded that the board pursuant to resolution 2020-002, the board would approve funds for asbestos abatement services for 4 commercial property locations, accepting Vanco, that's resolution, funding to be contingent upon the state of Texas approving the city's request to condemn the properties, and to consider awarding fund, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. And to award the contract to Vanco Insulation, Inc. for a bid total of $71,695. So I have everything in there.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
And
All
then
right.
Good job.
Also a motion for F as well, because that would be the consulting. That kind
Well-
of goes with that resolution.
Well, we got 3 different deals. We probably ought to do each one of them separately. So
We'll do, yes, we can do these 2. Is that all right? The resolution and the asbestos
Right,
contract.
so I have a motion, Joseph made a motion for D and E with a second from Dr. Peak, and then
Correct. Okay. So it is moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it and the motion is carried. I am so excited. I think that's just wonderful. I really am. Yeah, I know.
we need to carry one more item F.
Right,
Needs to
Okay, let's go ahead
finalize
and
that
get this
piece
to
of it.
Finalize, all right. So board to review and consider awarding funds to Improtech Hibbs and Todd for asbestos consulting for abatements for 4 commercial properties. The funding will be contingent upon the state of Texas approving the city's request to condemn the properties for the consulting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded that the Improtech Hibbs and Todd contract is awarded for the 20,000. Help me. somebody.
21,809.50.
Thank you. 21,809.50. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it and the motion is carried. Now can we clap?
Good, you betcha, you betcha.
I had a quick
That's-
question for Dana, and if it's possible, can they keep as many trees like around the Palomino? Will they do that? Will they try to keep trees like around the Palomino Hotel and those if
We'll
they
do
can?
the best we can. I think if it, they'll have to get the structures down, so there may be some scrub trees that will come down, but the larger trees will try and.
Try to keep.
I'm with you on that.
Okay.
I think, trees provide a really nice benefit visually as well as other benefits. So I think it will keep whatever we can.
Great. Thank you. Really good job. We appreciate this a lot.
Do we know how long it'll take to get approval from the state?
It's a plan for the asbestos abatement, what we provided the state. They have at least 10 working days minimum time to review. And in that, called the NESHAP process. It's an acronym for what they have to do. The condemnation letter is part of that. So they actually have 10 days, I believe, to make the decision. And once that decision is made, and I think we're going to get an affirmative on moving ahead, then it's just a contractor coming in and taking care of business. EHT, the consulting firm, will draw out a plan for wetting it down and doing everything that has to be done to keep asbestos without getting freeborn. I would hope, Dr. Peak, that we're looking at 45 to 60 days once we get the NESHAP approval. That's what I think.
And I want to applaud the city and SEED for partnering with these type of things. We've talked about this for several years and it's coming together very well. And a lot of it because of Dana and his willingness to to really tackle that stuff. But this board, without you choosing to do this, these other buildings would still be standing and Palomino would still be a complaint. So thank you for taking care of that.
There's a lot that goes on, honestly. Because I'm at the meetings here, you get to see me, but what you don't see is the staff going out there, meeting with the consultant on site to go over getting them in the building, and Russell taking a lock off where we need to have a lock off to get into a building, and then taking pictures to make sure that we can show that they're unsafe structures. So there's a lot that goes into it. I get to come and present it to you, and I appreciate, I like doing that, but I wouldn't be able to do that unless some guys are doing it in the background and taking care of business that way. So Danny, Heine, Robert, and Crystal, and everybody else, Russell's crews, everybody's involved in it.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good news. Do you want to move back to 4B or are you waiting?
Now, we need to do 4B after our closed session.
After close, okay, gotcha. So we will move to action item 4G. Board to review and consider approving resolution 2020-003 in regards to incentivizing a housing developer.
G and H will be
Together.
similar to what we did before.
Okay.
One allows us to do, the actual resolution allows us to go into a contract to have an incentive for that, but it also talks about the justification of building workforce housing. So there's some particulars in there that would talk about that part of it, to be able to give us that opportunity. We worked to make sure that it was a minimum of 3. We also put in a maximum number, because if we're going to do a per square foot and we don't know what those square footage are at this point, we felt there needed to be a maximum number in there that it didn't go over. And if it would happen to build bigger houses, they could come back and ask for an extension in that. But this gives us the opportunity to kind of carry that forward. There's been a lot of discussion. In fact, we met with Jose a couple times. There's some electric lines and stuff he's already met with Encore. Some of them are actually going to be raised in height because they're pretty low. One pole is going to be removed. And these 3 pieces of property have really very little frontage. It's pretty small. They're almost going to be those pie-shaped type lots. They'll also have easement access on the backside that'll include the fence that'll block off some of that view from the back of the convenience store. Any thoughts or questions? And again, I'll try to answer everything on H and or G and H. We talked about a 3-phase section that once the property itself was actually bought, and we were furnished a set of plans for house number 1 that we could advance an opportunity there up to the $12,000, depending on what that is. Second phase would kick in once house number 1 is poured and dried in. House number 2 has a slab, and then phase 3 would be done when house number 1 and 2 were dried in and number 3 had the slab. And there is some flexibility there if we need to do or look at other things. So
Ken, I was looking to see, is there a minimum square footage requirement in here somewhere? I did not see that.
no, sir, there was not that included.
I know we didn't
First
have a
one he's looking at,
maximum.
there is not a minimum or a maximum. The first house he's looking at is 1,850 square foot. And that's kind of
Okay,
what he's looking at for probably all 3 of them in that neighborhood.
good.
You know, and I think that's one of the things to think about, you know, even though we're trying to set somewhat precedents, we know that we can actually alter this as time goes on. Are we concerned that a house could be too big? You probably have a bigger concern of a tiny house. You know, I was in Fredericksburg over the weekend. There's actually a community down there that have already built 10 tiny houses along an area. So it's just something we'd have to at least think about going forward of how we would want to address those type of things. And I think there's.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to say, I think it's important for us to not, control what people build or have a claim of what type of home or that kind of thing. But it's interesting to note that your thought was the same as mine, that we would hate to incentivize someone to build a 900 square foot, 1-1 or something of that nature. So if there was the next time we put one together, we might want to consider a minimum just to ensure that we're getting some bang for the buck.
I think that makes sense. And Dana, I'm not sure, isn't there a rule and probably an ordinance in Sweetwater that you can't build under a 1,000 square foot house on property?
I think it's mainly dictated by the size of the lot.
Oh, okay.
So we don't have a tiny home ordinance or any minimum there.
Okay.
Usually cover so much of the lot depending upon how they're platted. So it could be a little bit smaller. I wish we probably need to look at something there. But anyway, I think what's being proposed falls right in line with what the lots will be and size wise.
And thank you, Joseph. Well, we'll definitely be looking at that going forward. If another thing comes along, is be thinking about a possible minimum at least.
I move adoption of resolution 2020-003.
Second.
So we're going to vote on these separately, or do
However you want to do it.
you want to?
And approval of the incentive agreement
Okay.
with Little Franca.
Great.
Second.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 2020-003 in regards to incentivizing a housing developer, along with approving the incentive agreement for Villafranca construction. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is carried.
Again, think about what you guys have done over the last couple of years. We had no housing. We did a housing study. We had everybody locally telling us that housing would not work in Sweetwater, Texas, and I'm not going to invest in it. Now, this is our third housing project that we've done in a little over 2 years. And it is making a difference. We're actually talking with some other folks that have some desires to continue this housing start, because they're finding that once it's built, there's a market for it and it's sold. The apartment complex, they've redone 17 apartments already. They still have a waiting list. And every time they get one done, they add at least one, if not two, to their list. So they've got, I think, 5 or 6 right now on their waiting list. So it's doing what you guys wanted it to do. And I think that we all as a group felt that that was what was going to happen. It was going to be a very positive thing.
Thank you, Ken.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. It's good. Okay, so we'll go to action item 4I. Board to review and consider approving the SEED MDD 2020-21 budget.
As part of the budget, we also need to have some conversation on the results of the retreat. Trying to put together a program work as we go forward. We'd be glad to take this budget and then kind of back up to it and figure out what it is how you're going to direct us to spend the funds. If we just get started on the budget on page 1, most of this was discussed at the last meeting. This will just be kind of a recap. To come up with those different sales tax numbers and interest income numbers, Misha puts together a formula that kind of puts that together, and I think she does a great job with it. She's been using the same type of thing the last couple of years, and I think it's a good way to show average, and you might explain a little bit about how you did that.
So I just pretty much take the average of 3 averages every month for the last, I think since 2008. I don't have my sheet with me. And then I take a yearly average, and then I take an average of month per month. And then just kind of the average of those 3, and gets us in like 958,621. And then on the interest income, as we discussed at the last meeting, we were really conservative just because of, economic things going on, and interest rates are down. And also, we could be looking at a very large project. So we kind of were conservative as possible with that interest income number.
So we move on to 5210, office supplies and equipment. That's pretty much a standard that we've been using. 5360, and at any time, please ask a question if you got one. Repairs and equipment maintenance, $500 for that. Postage is at $175. Audit is at $1,500, and we are working on trying to get seed closed out. So at some point, we're going to have only one audit instead of two audits, the way we have to do it right now since seed is still around. Legal, we talked about increasing that a total of $5,000, and we also talked about having Jeff come to all our meetings and also review our agenda. And Misha and Jeff got together and kind of based on 24 meetings or 24 hours a year for meetings, 2 hours per meeting, plus about a half hour per agenda. So we're looking at about a $6,000 cost just for the meeting attended and the agendas. So that increase of $5,000, that 120% of that is actually the what would be going to Jeff to take care of our meetings and stuff. Insurance and bonding on 5550 on bottom of 2. That all comes from TML, plus it comes from our board liability insurance. I will ask at this time to ask Misha to be part. I'd like to talk to the board about a couple budget items. On the top of page 3, 5560, mine, of course, I'm not asking for anything. And also, as I understand, the city is not at this point planning on a 3.3 COLA as they have in the past. When we come to Misha.
I'm sorry, Ken, we're not planning on the 3.3, but we might do something lesser than that.
Okay.
Just for your information.
Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
But either way, I'm on mine. I'm not asking for anything there, but I am asking for, at the very minimum, a 5% for Misha. If we look back last year, she did not get a raise. She did get, as part of her hiring, when she completed her education, she got $100 a month bump on that. But just as an example, and an 18-year-old starting at USG makes $21 an hour, would make almost $3,000 more than what I'm even projecting her to make right now. And I guarantee you, the value of Misha far exceeds however good that employee would be at USG. I think that we hit a home run when we got Misha. I think that it's truly amazing that is no longer than she's been here, the ability that I can trust her to take care of things and know that it's going to get done and allow me to do some of the other things I've needed to do. So again, I would recommend at a minimum 5% increase for her.
That's over the total package.
Yeah, on just salary. And of course, then the rest of the stuff gets adjusted based on the salary.
Incrementally.
Yes, sir. And that number right there is with a flat 5%.
It does include.
Yes, yes.
This number includes a 5%?
Yes, it does. Yeah, Patty actually, and I had her, because she's right now at 38.3, and a 5% is 19.15. Any comments before I bring her back in? We felt that she didn't need to be in the room when we were talking about this. And I can truly tell you, I've not met anybody out there right now that I would rather have than to replace her. She does a tremendous job.
Have you got any comparative around the country of seconds in any seed positions, that later we could look at?
Yeah, I mean, our state does a deal, but the problem is that seconds in most places have multiple people in their staff.
They're secretarial more than.
No, well, yeah, they either have the administrative assistant or they have the business marketing person, where she's actually taking care of it from one side all to the other, and many times dealing face to face with the customer, if I'm tied up or out of town or anything like that.
Yeah.
And she truly has the tools to be able to do it all. And I mean, she's young, she's learning, and she's learned a lot already. I've really enjoyed working with her, but probably that position's in the 45 to 60 range, depending on which side of the scale you put it on.
Yeah, $20 an hour is she's under 20 on her current.
Yes.
And that's it's pretty weak.
Now, I will say that the benefit package is better than most. So
yeah.
that does make a difference.
You bet.
And makes a long-term difference.
Yeah.
But I think that her value far exceeds what she's getting paid.
I would move that we stick with a 5% increase as you asked for, Ken.
Well, I'll get her back in and we can, because we're not really looking to do each one individually. We'd be looking to do it as a budget.
Gotcha.
Is there any heartburn with making her salary contingent on what the city's COLA is to city employees? And I'm not taking away from the job she does at all. It's a difficult time for a lot of people right now. And
but my recommendation 5% is not a COLA at all. Mine is a step increase to actually make her the director of marketing and director of administrative services. She was hired as the assistant director of all that. And this is actually moving her into a different position.
thank you for your recommendation.
Okay. You might want to get a box, start cleaning up your stuff.
Okay, did I get fired?
Into the meeting.
At the end of the meeting.
Travel related expense, yes.
Ken, before we head back to the next section, can we go back to 5540 legal? This is kind of a petty thing, but could we at least break that 25 down as to what we're thinking the additional $19,000 will be utilized for? For instance, incentive contracts, contract reviews, etc. Could we estimate and just plug in? And it's just a budget, so we don't have to be perfect. But I would like to see at least kind of what you're thinking as to that extra 19,000, how it will be expensed.
Well, to be honest, Joseph, we don't know if we got a project, so it's hard to do that. And when we come up with different answers, sometimes the board asks us to go back to the attorney, so we go back to the attorney based on the questions that come from the board most of the time. Misha does a great job of actually putting together a packet, and every time Jeff gives us some good information, we use that on a future question that comes up, and we're able to go back to that. But as we've talked before, as an MDD, even though there's a lot of places doing it, not many places are doing it to the extent that this community is doing it in a different type of project. So, I mean, other than a WAG, I'm not really sure how we do that, Joseph.
Well, again, Ken, it's just a budget, and it would be nice to have an idea. And if you recommended 50, I get it. We've got to have services like Jeff provides us. I was just looking for what your thoughts were as far as the other 19. I'd like to have that itemized. And again, it's just a budget. It's a guess. We wouldn't hold you, to that. It would be good for me to at least have an idea of what you're thinking as it relates to that extra 20,000.
Okay, well, we'll actually go back and kind of take some history of the last couple of years and see what we've done with that and use that as kind of some guidelines.
I've got one more question in that legal area, and maybe I missed this at the last meeting, and Jeff, don't take this wrong, but I don't know what you're accomplishing sitting there and listening to this meeting and costing us so many dollars per hour when his job and his profession is to take care of us after the meeting. So we're spending $6,000 for him to view. I mean,
The tension in the room just went thick.
Where's that coming from?
where's that coming from? Hello, thank you, Lord.
Caller? I think that was Karen, because I don't see her on here anymore.
Okay.
Anyway, anybody have anything, opinions on that?
We asked him based on David's suggestion, and I think that's how that came up. Because if an item came up that we needed an attorney to help us during the meeting, that was the reason.
Oh, okay, so we're spending $6,000 on the if, just in case.
I tell you, that $6,000 is well worth the investment. If something goes awry and you don't have your lawyer here to have the ability to answer a question for you, and you make a wrong move of some sort.
Well, do we make any decisions that are that punctual, that go into effect that quick?
Any action item that we take. I mean,
Sure.
if he really is saving us from ourselves.
Any action item we take has already been reviewed. Multiple times, I might add. Now, it's no big deal. It's not my 6,000, but
You're a $1 million corporation with lots of responsibility. $6,000, if that can keep you out of trouble, that's well worth the investment, in my opinion.
I agree on the insurance, but it just seems,
Jeff has answered
it
one
seems
question.
boring for Jeff, what I'm thinking.
Well, that's,
Jeff has answered one question today already that was asked of him, and had he not been here, then you wouldn't have gotten the answer to that question.
That's true.
I think that's
he
kind of
gives,
proven itself
he
this
gives
morning.
me some confidence and just, I don't know, it's security for me to have an attorney on board like that. I'm very much in favor of it.
All right, if we're ready to move on, we're on page 3, number 9, 5590. Those have all been revised and reduced based on expenditures we expect. Again, that's been dropped quite a bit. 5,600 on the top of page 4. I'll let Misha talk a little bit about the website. Again, remember when we talked about this, she went out to 5 different companies, narrowed it to 3, and then picked the one company that felt like we got the best bang for the buck. And there's she's actually she talks about it. She's going to talk about 5,600, but then there'll also be a small piece of it over in 5,770 on the bottom of page 5. So those two will be a part of this discussion.
So since our meeting last month, we actually got in touch with Atlas, and they were able to send us a service contract agreement. And I just kind of wanted to go over, I guess, like the pricing structure. Essentially, we'll pay three different times. The first time would be collected upon signing of the agreement of $5,000. And if you would remember right, the total cost of the workforce IT and the design and development of our website is $14,500. The next payment will be collected after the commencement of the project. 2 months after that we would be paying another $5,000. And then the third would be collected upon the delivery of the website, which they estimated takes about 11 weeks. And so that last $4,500 would be paid upon the delivery of their product. And also another couple of, were there any questions on that service agreement contract or anything? On the advertising and marketing, we also removed that oil and gas report and took the drone footage down. We reduced that from 6,000 to 4, just because of the recommendation of getting with Chief Grant Madden and possibly seeing if Mitch can do some video editing. And it's really hard to estimate how much that would cost to edit because we're not sure how many minutes of video it will take or anything.
Did you have a chance to talk to Grant?
I believe,
I've spoken with Grant,
yes. Yeah.
and he's good with it. It would be on the city's dime.
Sure.
That's all I have for that area.
And you might go ahead and jump down to 15, the bottom of 5, because
Yes,
there's 2 parts there that actually, or 3 parts that still stay with the website.
Right. So in addition to the 14,500 for the setup of Workforce IQ and design and development of a website, we will have yearly fees on page 5 down at the bottom for website hosting and service and support, and then also the ongoing annual fee for the Workforce IQ. The Workforce IQ annual fee is $2,700, and the website hosting, maintenance, and support is $1,750, and those would just be ongoing annual fees.
And like we talked about at the retreat, the Workforce IQ is really important. We're going to have to do it, and I hate to repeat this again, but we have to do a better job of preparing our students for work within our community. A lot of jobs that they've been prepared for someplace else. And if we don't do a better job of creating a workforce pipeline, many of our companies are not going to expand here, and it'll be harder to get more companies to come in. So we think that will be a very big piece, and we'll also be using that with the school districts and providing them with information on a lot of their career studies and programs like that, and we'll be able to have that data available. Over the last several years, some of that data was actually available to us free, but is no longer free. Through the Small Business Development Center, they've, because of budget cuts, they've cut all that stuff out. The Workforce Board in Abilene has some stuff that's available to us. They just don't have the time with refocusing of what they've had to do. So we're kind of on our own, and this is going to give us a leg up on getting good information. Are there any questions?
Ken,
Yes.
Yeah, Ken, if I could just make a comment. I think it's important for us to remember too that Misha got us hooked up with Google Analytics, and I assume you guys have been tracking you report occasionally the website traffic, and I think that's important for us as board members to consider that we are seeing an increase in our site visitors. And so while it is somewhat difficult to choke down that 14.5, but I think Misha does have the data that illustrates that more and more people are coming to our site, which I think is fantastic. So I just wanted to throw that out there, Ken, just to remind everyone that we do have some data to support some of these expenditures, in my humble opinion.
I will add in that I do agree with Joseph, and I have been tracking Google Analytics over the last year, and we have steadily increased site users.
And I think that's something that with this new website, what we could do, we've got unemployment numbers, we got stuff like that. We can just start doing a monthly report that actually shows that, because our social media has also been gaining some ground on it too. So we'll just start putting together a report that on a monthly basis will provide that information.
I had a question.
Mhm.
This may not be the proper place for it, but in our budget, or in our last meeting, we talked about the West Broadway property that Seed owns, and we talked about the possibility of listing it or whatever. I know we have the mowing expense on here, which will, but I'm not talking about the budget item. I'm just talking about, is that in the process, or are we talking about that anymore?
Well, again, that was a retreat. So there's a lot of things talked at a retreat that we go forward with, and some things we don't. It's actually an item on our budget that we'll address here in a few minutes.
Okay.
And while you're there, I mean, my thought would be that if that is what we want to do, that we go ahead and get the appraisal done now. Go ahead and get that process started. So as we go into our new year, we can actually get that thing put on the market.
And I've actually, if you'll look at the line item in parentheses beside the West Broadway property, I added mowing / appraisal.
Right.
So that,
Okay. So it is in the works
Yes.
to do
Yes.
something.
If
That's
the
fine.
board wants us to go forward with that.
Gotcha. And we will make that, it'll be an agenda item at some
Well,
point.
it can be, I mean, if you approve this budget based on that, then we'll be going forward with that and go ahead and get an appraisal done on it.
Because it says mowing / appraisal.
Yes.
Okay.
Middle of 5642 utilities, pretty much the same thing that's gone there. 5710, the one major change there is doubling the TEDC, which gives Misha an actual individual membership at the TEDC State Association. Administration fee, as we understand, will be the same. Rental, middle of page 5, rental and equipment number 5760, building lease. And I'd really like to address that because there's been some discussion on the chamber and the COVID and how it's been affected. Even without that, I've actually gone and as board members, you're probably going to say, why did you do that? But over the last several years, I've gone to the chamber and let them know that it is probably due for an increase in our rent. We have this $1,200 a month that we pay is a number that I gave them 13 years ago. I did research on it. We actually wanted more space, so we actually acquired more space. But at that time, we did nothing more than just space, which included the utilities. When you think about over the last 13, 14 years, the value the chamber brings to Seed is tremendous. Not only do we have a really nice place, we also use a space downstairs that is not part of our lease, and they allow us to use that at any time. We also get to use their refrigerator and drinks for any of the meetings that we have. And I think I've stated this several times. When they're open, we're open, whether we're there or not. And I think that's a big thing to the public that sees that Seed's always open, and Misha may be off someplace doing something and I may be off doing something, but we're still have that open presence. So it would be my recommendation on the fact that they needed an increase, plus the fact that we're actually using more services than what we started out using, is I would like to recommend that increase to $2,000 a month, which would be a $24,000 total lease. So it's not just building, it's building and staff time.
So that is not in this, or is it?
No, that's not it. Right now, we're just what we had.
So from 14.4 to 24?
Yes, ma'am. And so that's all pre-COVID. So that, I mean, honestly, that would have come into play at any time. But if you're talking about COVID, they're right now bringing in about 25 to 30% of their hotel motel tax.
So would this be temporary, or would this be something that we?
My opinion, the value is there from now on.
I agree with you.
They have just helped us with so many things, and we help them. There's no doubt. I mean, but I think that's that great partnership is kind of like the city and Seed. We're finding ways that both of us can participate in something, and our community benefits from all that.
Well, think this, if you didn't have chamber, you would have to have a full-time receptionist.
It would be tough.
When
Yes.
you two are out in the building, somebody would have to be there to answer the phone. So what's an employee cost? Much more than that.
And we'd need more space to be able to have a room big enough for the meetings and and unless there's a question, we'll just keep going. Bottom of 5, Misha's already talked about most of that.
I will add in, at the last meeting, we discussed a possible retail consultant. I've talked to 3 different companies and wanted to give y'all a price of that and see if it's in your interest to move forward. We got a few mixed reviews on the feedback from whenever I asked y'all to do feedback for our overview of the retreat. I talked to a company known as C-Source, and they quoted us $30,000 to $35,000 per year. Buxton is also another retail consultant, $35,000 a year for full service. Retail Strategies, they have like a breakdown, $45,000 for the first year, $35,000 for the second, and $35,000 for the third. Most of these companies want you to sign roughly a 3-year agreement. So I don't know if that's something y'all still are interested in, or.
Well, and part of that is, to me, is a conversation that I'm not going to necessarily ask that you approve the budget right here in just a couple of minutes, because I think we need to talk about our program of work, and as staff, we need to know what during the retreat we had, how much of that we want to move forward with and how much of it we don't. there's a lot of things that was talked about. And when we got the reports back from each of the board members, I mean, it's a pretty wide area of interest. So it'd be hard for us to just take that and just do it all based on just that. So I think we're going to have to ask some more questions that we'll include in this budget. Then-
Where are the overview notes? The tab?
There's a tab in your binder that says over, they're right in front
Oh,
of the
oh,
budget.
you put it all on, that's right, it's all on one page. Thank you.
And then just to real quickly finish up on the budget, our page number 6 was a carryover, that 5770. And that, you know, the mowing and appraisal, the mowing's a question mark, whether or not we even want to do that or not.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
And Jeff, this may be for you. Why would we need an appraisal before we sell the 72 acres on West Broadway? It's on the books for $305,438.72. So if we're considering putting it on the market, why would we need an appraisal?
Carolyn, let me jump in real quick, Jeff. Carolyn, I actually recommended that last time we met on this topic, because I wanted to see what the highest and best use was of that property. And that would allow us to make sure that we have a value that is well supported if we do decide to market it.
Yeah, and there wouldn't be any necessarily legal requirement. Y'all are allowed to do what you want in your discretion as a board. You have the right to sell and lease and do whatever. But for Joseph's point, that would probably be the most articulate reason why.
Thank you.
Carolyn, based on my experience, I think we could get an appraisal on this for $1,000. I mean, I don't think it's going to be that large of an expenditure. But I may be the only one in this camp, but that was the rationale that I had at the time.
Oh, if it's just 1,000, I mean, it won't be a big expense then.
So I think that's kind of the end of the individual items on the budget. And then we have the 5771, which is the little over $660,000, which kind of end up being in your program of work, and trying to look back at what projects that you want us as board members to look at for this next year. As Misha talked about, retail's been talked about. Do we want to tackle retail on our own, or are we asking to go out and get a consultant come in and help get not only advice on what to prepare for, but some of those consultants also help find retailers that are looking for like places.
So Ken, would it be helpful to you if we went around the table and each one of us gave our opinion, or is that not helpful? You've already
Oh,
had that,
I think that would, I mean, we've got some of that, but I think, you know, any of us that go through a retreat, a lot of things sound really good during a retreat.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we start thinking about things. And then, but we also think that, you know, sometimes you have a retreat, and I always used to say the chamber retreat came up with the top 100 things that the chamber to do, and the chamber could probably only do 3 or 4 of those in a year. So we just somehow need to get back down to something that's doable. And even over the next couple of years, we're very comfortable with that.
Well, let's just do it. Joseph, do you have an opinion on the retail consultant? Misha has some prices of different firms. 35,000 is what I'm hearing is about the mid-range.
Per year.
Per year, yeah, per year, 35,000 per year. We're just gonna go around and everybody just weigh in on
And
it.
I will add in, and that's a full service. That's like hiring them on to actually be the feet on the ground and help you contact, and they'll work between you and whatever restaurant or retail. There are cheaper services that they'll do, like retail analysis, and maybe point us in a direction that, okay, so a Chick-fil-A would work, or, you know, it kind of tells you that, but they don't actually work for you. They just give you the study, and that's, you know, in the $7,000 to $10,000 range for that one-time study that they would do, and they would provide you contacts, and you would be the one to contact them yourselves and stuff like that.
So you would be calling Chick-fil-A yourself.
Correct.
No.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I think we do a lot of good community stuff. I think we do, and very knowledgeable in the economic development. We don't have the skill sets at this point to do the retail side. I'm not saying that we can't learn those, but at this point in time, that's a whole lot more complicated, just because of the dynamics that I've learned over the last several years of what they're looking for. You know, they have a matrix, and if you don't meet their matrix, they're not going to talk to you no matter what you have. You know, it's a number of rooftops, average income, and all those type of things all come together. So
a consultant would likely find that same situation. I mean, if we don't have the number of rooftops and the number of whatever, the consultant would find.
I think the difference is we don't know those questions. These are, because every company does it completely different. And that's the advantage to and I'm not, I'll be honest with you, I'm not in favor of a lot of consultants. I think you can spend a lot of money for stuff that you don't get the tremendous value. But I think there are some things. If we look back our housing study, I don't know that we'd be where we are today without that housing study. Because I think that actually showed us some things that we could do. And again, we can learn those things, but it's going to take us a little longer to get up to speed and still try to take care of everything else.
Carolyn, my thoughts in response to your question is precisely what Ken said. We know, or I know, that certain brands that local citizens here have told me they would like to see, such as a Chili's or an Applebee's, typically, and this is pre-pandemic, typically would like to see 25,000 population or greater. There are a few exceptions, my hometown being one. But, you know, overall, I think it's up to us. What do we want? And what do we want to bring into the citizens of this city and county, and then go from there. I don't think we need a consultant to tell us what we want. I think we decide what we want and then create a path. And from what I have been told from various members of the community, they would love to see a chain pub style restaurant such as a Chili's or an Applebee's as a sit down restaurant option. They would also like to see some other shopping opportunities downtown. That's what I have been told. And so I think taking on that project, we would be able to do that in-house. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. That's good. Gil, you're up.
I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I agree with Ken in the fact that our staff shouldn't be versed in that knowledge at this point. I mean, that's probably not the right terminology, but it is a special skill set that we have not developed. If Joseph's comment, if we go out and say, well, I want a Logan's. Well, if Logan's won't come here, what have we accomplished? We're back to square one.
Besides, they've filed bankruptcy.
Well, that's the reason I want them.
Well, and it was funny you brought them up because we actually chased Logan's.
Or at one time?
Yes, we did.
Anyway, you see my point. So I don't really have an opinion that is strong in one direction. Do you, Russ?
Sure. With the interstate running right through the south side of town, and who knows how many opportunities we miss pulling people off the interstate every day. I've wondered about that. I hear, you know, the 25,000 population to bring something in, but how do you put a population on the interstate that's running right through there? Those people are, you know, I mean, I was sitting at Heft the other day, and bless their hearts, they're trying, and you look over there at Waterburger, and both those lanes are just, I mean, they're going to be doing a bang up business right now. And these hotels that we get hotel motel offices money off of from the Coliseum and the museum and the chamber, and more we can do to help them. You know, do we not go the 35,000 route and maybe hire a consultant to train Misha, who I could, you know, could learn a lot of this stuff and ask those questions and find the right people to ask. I don't know, that might be an option, but you know, we've got to figure out a way to pull more money off and more traffic off the interstate. How we do that, you know, that's the $1 million question to me.
Thank you.
What can we do to make that intersection out there more attractive and bring more businesses in? But we want to be able to help us pull off the interstate.
Dr. Peak?
Well, one of the big selling points we used with the creation of the MDD was that, yeah, we're going to continue to do industrial, but we're going to expand the quality of life, retail, and housing. And we've made two of those extra steps as far as quality of life and housing, but we haven't done any. The only thing we've done retail would have it just came here. We didn't bring them in. You know, we kind of jumped on the opportunity to help Sutherland's. And I think now is a great time to lay the groundwork for getting the necessary skills to recruit retail so that when the economy really starts turning around, we're in a position to act. I didn't think the fees would be quite as high as what we're quoting because, you know, you're looking at $100,000 commitment, but I think that the staff could use some expertise, you know, maybe on a smaller scale than the quotes that we've received. So I would recommend that we pursue it. Because it's, you know, when you go to those community meetings, you know, people want retail options including dining.
Thank you. That's how I line up too. I really am not in favor of any kind of a study that's going to do a bunch of surveys and ask our some people in Sweetwater what they want. I personally think that's a waste of money.
And from my
So, but a
understanding,
training for staff, I think
Right.
is good.
and from my understanding is what these companies do is they have, they already know the standards that restaurants look for. If we don't have 25,000 people, they might know that this company will take a traffic count as opposed to population, but we don't know that. And so I think maybe even just trying the study at first, or not the study, but the where we're given the contact information and stuff and we actually go out, I think that would even be beneficial as opposed to like the full service.
Okay.
And we might even think about it. I mean, again, there's only 2 of us staff, so we're already getting ready to take on a website that is staff intensive. Anybody that's ever had a website build, you have to have a lot of content that goes in that. I'm not sure we can handle doing a website and all this retail at the same time. So if we're actually thinking about that, I would like to at least maybe push it off to the first of the year to carry another conversation on once that website kind of gets built this fall.
It's reasonable. I mean, you can only do so much.
Right. Well, and we want to make sure we put our best effort and get the best product out of it. And I just don't want to have either one of them get short timed.
Is retail something that someone on the same chamber staff could maybe do some type of work on, since that would benefit the chamber? I don't know. I'm just talking.
Yeah, I mean, at this time, I don't think it's on their plate to do that.
Okay.
So as we've gone through that budget, it gets back to when we start looking at program of work, we need to have a better understanding of what it is you guys really want. I mean, it's like we talk about park equipment. There's a lot of park equipment that was talked about. Where are we looking to go? I know we're not asking for a final decision, but at least a roadmap to kind of get us to where you think we need to be going.
So I think Ken and I have a few points that we really need direction on. And I have a little sheet right here and it's mainly the ones that I asked y'all specific questions on that overview. So if we want to, we can just go down this long. There's mixed feelings on the facade improvement grant. A few of y'all want to include residential. Some say non-residential only. How do we feel about that? And expanding the boundaries to include all of our corridors.
You know, our thought, whether we do residential or not, is not an issue for us. We like the idea of sticking with the boundaries and really expanding that. And we're not putting a dollar amount, so we're not putting a limit or a short on. You know, each one of you will make that decision if we bring a project back to us or we bring a project to you. So we're just kind of trying to figure out, I think everybody likes the expanded boundaries, but is commercial versus retail one or the other or both?
With your expanded boundaries, how much residential do you have?
Yeah, you know, Elm Street, Haley Street, East Broadway, Lamar. I mean, almost every place, there's actually residential out on West Broadway, but I doubt if it'd be something we'd look at, but I'll be honest, I like the idea of staying with commercial, just
I
personally.
think you're gonna get into a real can of worms when you start doing residential and,
But, over the last 18 months, and I think your son, Rob, actually had some programs where the communities were doing the incentivizing tax short, what would they do? Do some tax payments if they're bought a house for 60,000 and invested it, all of a sudden it's worth 180, then whatever the difference is over a 5-year period, you turn around and write them. And those are communities that have a smaller footprint and can't expand their footprint. So the only way to get more tax value is to increase the value of the places there. I think that's maybe a good project down the line, but we've got a lot of good projects to do right now. And I think this demolition and this facade are great parts of that.
Why don't we increase our boundaries and just stay commercial in those increases? And then if that in fact works and we're happy with it, then we can look at residential as the next step, someplace down the line.
Okay, I like that. Do y'all have I know, Carolyn, you made the comment about possibly having a maximum number just kind of in our mind for a year.
And would you stay with the 15,000? Is that what we want to do
Per location.
per location?
I mean, the ones that we've talked about that helped make a decision is that there was at least enough out there. Not all of them have even gotten that. Not even get close to it. But I think that as we expand our boundaries, there are going to be some facilities that just going to probably take more than that. But I think that's a pretty good number to still stay with.
Incentivize them to start.
15,000 is our max. And each one of those comes back to this board anyways, so it won't move forward without it. All right, sounds like we're good to go on that one.
And I think, Ken, if you took that extra step later, if we did want to include residential, we could do like a community pride award or a community pride program that was geared specific to property enhancement. But I think you're onto something with just the commercial personally.
For the housing size on our incentive agreement, do we all agree with coming up with a minimum amount of square footage?
Yeah.
Okay. Downtown projects discussed at the last meeting.
So what is the minimum? I'm sorry.
Well, do y'all want to name a minimum, or do you want to have Ken and I come up with it? Or,
I mean, somebody's probably got an idea. Do y'all?
What's a good house size?
What?
A good minimum house size for building? Probably 1,000.
Residential.
1,200.
Yeah.
Do y'all like that? Number 1,200?
Yes.
Did you hear that, Joseph?
I could not hear.
We asked Dana on a minimum house size and he recommended 1,200 square foot.
Oh, I'd increase it to 15. I mean, to think about the tax rolls, you get a bigger bang for the buck. So if we're incentivizing a home builder, do we really want him building 1,000 or 1,200 square footers? I think 3.2s would be more customary. I'd say 15 minimally, or maybe even 1,600. But those are my thoughts, guys.
Isn't like a typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath, like 1,200 square foot or so? Or,
No, it's
or 1,600?
It's 16. Well, I mean, if you look at what Gary's building out there south of town, they're coming in around 1,625, 1,650 minimally of actual living square footage. So I would, my preference would be 1,600, but I wouldn't go below 15, just my opinion.
I like that.
Okay.
So was it 15 or 16? I would say 15 just in case. 15, okay, just in case we have somebody who wants to build on small while.
Well, I think the advantage of today, a 1,500 square foot with the open concept feels like a pretty good sized house.
And that'd be living space, right?
Right.
Not including garage, right?
Not including garage.
I guess an HVAC
Or
supplied space.
Yeah.
That's just an important.
Downtown projects. What do y'all, I mean, this is just for our program of work. So do you want something like that to be in there that we can explore options of possibly funding porta potties for the things that are held downtown, or funding a stage and putting Seed's name on it? Or those were a couple of the ideas that were thrown out. Sound system. I don't know. What are y'all's thoughts?
Yeah, I think I mentioned, a portable sound stage where you could have it sponsored by somebody, Family RV, kick in $35,000 for it,
Which one are you talking about?
That's your son's business, not yours.
I'd like to talk about family motorsports. I love it.
But to give you an idea, when Joseph so nicely took us over to East Texas, his former home, they spent $100,000 on a portable stage for downtown activities. Really nice. So, I mean, it pulls up, you unfold it, and it is a tremendous piece of equipment.
So we would just, I mean, my thought on this was just to be really careful that it's only downtown projects and you don't get into a lot of, requests from other nonprofits or from other causes, because that's the only thing I would, but if you just stuck with a partnership, you're talking about a partnership with the chamber with the downtown projects. Is that what you're talking about?
I think that's just a conversation. And do we want to own a trailer that we, Jeff probably would want to chime in on this, that then create some liability issue for us? And are we going to have to be the
And
ones that
then-
move it? And
That is something I don't think we should add to your plate or Misha's plate, is to be responsible for any of these things either. My opinion, that your time could be spent better. That's just my opinion.
And who will you make mad because you tell them, no, you can't use it?
Good point.
For sure.
we'll say, oh, that's a board decision.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, those are things that some of those things are really good ideas, but the reality of
Practical.
implementation, my little Jeep, I don't think would be able to pull that trailer downtown. I have to make sure Russ stays on the board, or Gil with the bigger trucks. And again, we're not asking for dollars to be committed to this. We're trying to get a board of kind of a program of work put together that kind of relates back to what it is you want. And we've changed over the last couple of years to where we don't itemize each one of our potential expenditures on incentives. So these are the type things that we could say, no, we really don't want to do that. In 6 months from now, you come back and say, I really want to re-talk about that. Well, then we can still do that.
Because we've increased our chamber donation by our chamber payment, whatever, by $10,000. So that's giving them some more money. And I mean, I know they're down right now, so that's a wash, but at some point that would sort of address some needs that they might be able to fund. I don't know. What does anybody else have any?
I like helping the downtown stuff, but to what extent? I think
Seems like it's got some potential.
because it is a quality of life, and as a volunteer, I don't mind volunteering and helping Karen in those projects. I just don't know that Seed needs to be the lead in some of that stuff.
Yeah, it probably used to be the chamber. I don't think it's even been brought up there. It's
Probably not.
an idea to them. They might be, or we might be real receptive to it. It might even be something where they put together a sub board or something to be in charge of that. There's a lot of people, younger people in the community that want to bring in outside entertainment, and this might be a way to get them kind of plugged in.
And you could probably raise some personal, some private money for some of these things, I think. I really think you could.
Okay.
So no on that.
Parks. The last meeting, I know Gil really would like to see some funds set aside for a skate park in Newman and Fraley. Carolyn has mentioned a walking trail. Our walking trail be upgraded in Newman Park. And I know we discussed playground equipment in some of the various parks. What are y'all's thoughts? We still want to look at playground equipment and
I drove around the other day and was looking at equipment, and I'm not doubting your word, but where we need it,
Basically all the parks.
all of them.
Yes, sir. Yeah. because the oldest equipment that we have is like Newman Park that's, was put in there in 1995. And some of it is getting, some holes and probably some, not so good deals in them. But, we've got equipment out at Lake Street Water Beach area, which, hasn't really been addressed, but we've got equipment at each park that really needs replacement.
I haven't been out to Lake Street Water. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, but we've just been in this position and, we haven't been able to do anything, with city funds to replace some of the stuff that's been needing to be done. So, hopefully with the board's help, we can start getting some of these things updated, which was addressed in the Parks Master Plan as well. When we did the surveys and the studies, one of the main issues was the upkeep, which was considered the updates of the equipment. So that was one thing that was really addressed during that Parks the survey.
Some of the equipment at Newman Park at a distance looks okay, but when you get up close, it's beat up.
That may be because what I see is still bright, shiny and yellow and red and, got the bright colors. Maybe what I need to do is a closer, just go look, just to make me.
Go play on it.
Me and Carolyn have this, I did mention this to Carolyn the other day, the one at Newman Park. Whenever I go out there and take my son, I can't fit in the slide because, kids climb on top of the slides and they get cracked. And so it's just like a hazard. There's sharp plastic sticking out and, on a couple of the slides there at Newman Park. I haven't played on any other equipment, so I'm not sure.
One other question I had is if we hung up somebody, is there any use, is that equipment, the secondary equipment, the used equipment, does it go to someplace, does it have a use for somebody?
I wouldn't recommend.
It's destroyed.
Yeah, I would probably recommend selling it for scrap or whatever. There's some liability issues in there that we probably need to check on if we did, pass it on to someone else.
But 100% of each item, and I'm not being tacky here, but 100% of each item is bad.
I'm not gonna say 100%, I would say high percentage.
High percentage of
That
it
needs to be replaced, because we're obviously not going to let there be liability issue with the kids playing on it right now.
Yeah.
So we are gonna, address those and repair those, but, I can say there is a liability that equipment doesn't replace.
Next question, going a step further. We say, yes, we will replace that equipment. Here's your some money. How long would it take to get it in these COVID days of delays? And
that's a really good question. I couldn't answer. We would have to try to find out and see. Most even delivery companies right now, just for common items, are really backed up. Y'all probably seeing this in your industry and everything too. So I would say it's probably going to be a while before we could get stuff, even delivered delayed.
so, but without getting it ordered, then we're never going to get on the list.
Exactly.
Misha has
I'm
some,
sorry, I'm taking up all the.
no, that's good. Misha has some pictures. if
I
y'all
do
wanna
have some
see.
pictures. This is Jones Park right here.
And that yellow plastic slide is what you're talking
No,
No,
isn't
this is Jones and it's newer. I mean,
The
it's
one I'm
it's
talking
good
about is in
equipment.
Newman.
about? Okay.
Right here, those two, the slide on each side
Uh-huh.
up there. And I'm sure it's just some kids getting up and climbing on top of it and eventually but it's broke and cracked and everything.
Yeah.
And so fitting inside the slide is kind of a issue.
That brings up the next question. Is that not replaceable? Can we replace them?
These
No.
are outdated and we,
Antiquated?
yes. And that one there is the 1995 that we installed, that micro receptacle right there on your right. We've had trouble getting parts. You see the bright yellow slide that's in front there.
Uh-huh.
We actually had to replace that like 2 years ago, I believe it was. And it was a nightmare trying to get that thing because it's just the equipment is so outdated. It's kind of like when you have a vehicle and you need parts for it and it becomes outdated, you start looking on eBay and you start looking online to get your parts and you buy find they come somewhere where, you know, an old salvage yard or something to get.
So it's just 2 years old and it's cracked? The yellow slide?
No, Lisa's talking about the ones on.
The spinny ones. the
Oh,
ones
I'm
that goes
sorry.
out.
Okay.
He was just saying he replaced those 2 years ago. and it
He
was
replaced
difficult.
the one
ones in the middle.
In the middle.
in the middle he
Right.
replaced, but she's talking about this. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
And then there's Fraley Park.
So Jones and Fraley are just right around the corner from each other, just to note. They really are, essentially, you could play one, and I mean, they're just right there together. And we did call the school to find out, talk to Kenneth Borders, the new COO, and he has said that their school playground equipment is locked now because of COVID after hours, but that as soon as they feel like it's safe, the school properties will be open to the public after hours. So that's what he said.
Here is Eastridge, and I believe Carolyn said that this was put in at the same time.
It's 1996.
Around the same time. And it's still in pretty good shape. We played on that one as well. I don't think it's. And then Southeast,
It's not a very good picture, but that I took
Yeah.
those pictures. I'm sorry, but
Now,
it's
This is school.
the schools, yeah.
right.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
We're just
I don't know.
gonna
Can
show-
you zoom in on that, Misha, or not?
Let's see.
It really is great equipment.
And it, I mean, really,
I don't know if you can.
it's really frustrating to me personally, because, you know, these other places have better equipment than we do.
Right, yeah.
And, even if you look at Sonic over there, their play equipment, they've got better equipment.
But you have to look, in my opinion, at the big picture of our city, because you have these children in our area, they have access to all of this. So, you know, we've got to look at what our needs are and what we have to make a decision from, in my opinion, a financial decision. So you still can't really
What's the
see that.
number,
very well.
135,000 requested budget? 135,000?
I'm not for sure. It's specific.
Well, there was different
Um,
phases and different levels of stuff.
So there was, All Abilities Playground Equipment at Newman was 200,000. Fraley Park, All Abilities Playground Equipment was 110,000. And at Jones Park, 110,000 as well for the playground equipment.
420 for 3 parks.
And from staff perspective, we need to know how, as a board, you want to handle that. Are we asking Russell and them to come up with recommendations of what they think, bring it to us, come back to you guys? How do we carry this thing forward?
Should we go around the room again? Would that be a fair way to do it? What do you think?
The first thing that pops out in my mind is, what does the city have budgeted for playground? Is there you contribute to a certain amount of money every year for upkeep?
For upkeep, we do, but as far as an overall capital improvement project, Russell, remind me where we are on that.
We have it listed in our budget, but we have not been able to do anything in several years.
It's a funding issue.
So it's mainly just the maintenance and upkeep. This is what we have in our budget right now.
So you don't have any capital money to spend. Is that because of the downturn in our COVID, or?
We've had several issues come up that has affected our funds, the last couple of years. I mean, even back, we had, some vehicles that we've had to replace that, come up at times that was not, supposed to be replaced. We had a garbage truck that caught on fire, you know, a while back. We had a rescue truck that had gotten totaled out on the interstate, and.
That's a $500,000 right there.
We were at losses on those, almost over $100,000 worth of losses. So we've had some things that popped up, unexpected, that we've had to take care of, you know, within the last few years. We just have not had the money, you know, to do capital projects and parking like this. There's been other necessities that we have to take care of.
Sure.
And parks are in our general fund, as y'all know, but 52% or so of our general fund is police fire. And so that's where we put our money. Anything that we take away for parks are going to be taken, or you set aside for parks, are going to be taken away from police and fire, which of course are life and death type situations for the folks in our community. That's why we're relying, or we hope to rely on the MDD for these types of quality of life projects, because any dollars that we pull away from the general fund from police and fire, that's just, we've got to prioritize police and fire in our general fund, period. And that's where we put our money.
How many parks do we have? We have Newman, Jones, Fraley.
Newman Johnson. We have a Booker T.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do we have equipment, Booker T?
That's
No, it's just
fairly,
basically a swing set there. Yeah, there's not much.
And then at Lake Sweetwater, you would not be putting anything out there.
Not yet. We'll look at that a little bit further down.
Joseph, do you have an opinion?
I struggle with this one a little bit, Carolyn. I'm still the new kid on the block, but I do go back to a thought process that I think we should ask ourselves. When the citizens of Sweetwater and Nolan County voted to alter the type of EDC, was it of the mindset or in general thoughts that we would be subsidizing the city with parks? And I wasn't here to answer that. I'd love to hear others' thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Right. I mean, Carol and I were part of the committee that kind of worked on that with the feasibility study that came through in the parks plan. And I mean, parks were talked about. I mean, there's the baseball, softball, all those things were talked about. So I don't know that any one thing was talked about any more than any other, but that quality of life and something for our kids to do was seemed to always be a high priority.
And if I may, Joseph, the vote for approving the MDD to fund these types of quality of life projects wasn't 51 to 49, it was 80 to 20 in favor of. So I'm just throwing that on the table for consideration as well.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Peak?
Well, we already made a significant contribution to Newman Park, and I think it's a great addition, but I think it's really, it's detracted from a little bit when you walk 30 yards to the west and you've got really dilapidated old playground. And, maybe an effort spread out over 3 years, so we don't look at, what was the figure, $400,000 a year?
It'd be about $500,000 when you.
Okay. That we do it in phases over the next few years. But I know there's some things at Newman Park that really, really need to be updated. And it would certainly complement the splash pad.
That's my opinion too. I think Newman Park, I'm good with helping Newman Park. I'm not so sure about those other two. I mean, I did get out and walk on them, and not that I'm an expert, and look at them, but Newman Park does seem to be the one that really needs some redoing.
The oldest is it? Oh, it's Jones. I'm sorry, Russ. It's 1995.
Yeah, it's 1995, because I remember when that was put in, but to me, I like, the splash pad is such a, it is a great addition, I think, but the playground equipment, if you had just a really nice one with the covers and all, but I think we have to be careful about doing it too.
If we might, in the bigger picture, we've also talked about softball, baseball fields, all that type of stuff. Jeff is wearing two hats today, one our legal counsel, but he's also someone that has been a part of baseball in Sweetwater for a long time and has kids playing. He and I have talked about it, and it's just a different perspective. And I thought that would be good for Jeff to just kind of give us his perspective from the baseball side.
Oh yeah, because obviously I've got two kids playing baseball right now. At least our primary little league field is an embarrassment to the city right now. It's physically and literally crumbling, covered in weeds. It's the field that we tend to bring the most people from out of town to play on. There's no grandstand on the home side. There's crumbling concrete. down the edge. It's crumbling railroad ties that used to hold up terraces. They're falling down. The fair poles, the foul poles are in foul territory. They don't line up with the baselines anymore, which is a really odd thing. There's something that we, some community members have talked about trying to get together to improve. So there is private individuals who are willing to help, but there's a lack of a little bit of a catalyst. Some of the other fields over by the Coliseum, they're in better shape. They're probably easier to fix than the main major league field. But even in that, there's no field for junior league. Once you get past a 12-year-old, we've got fields that go from 60-foot bases over to the high school that is at 90-foot bases. So there's nowhere in between that 13, 14, 15-year-olds. They go straight from a little league field to essentially a full-size baseball field with 90 feet, 66 inches. Just something that we've observed lately, especially as our kids have grown up and used the facilities. That one on 419 though it's a bad look for Sweetwater. You can tell at some point it was probably one of the nicest little league fields in West Texas. I mean, but it's just crumbling right now. So.
Do you have an estimate, just a ballpark figure, Jeff, what it would take?
A lot.
Well, and I think there was a good point that, I went to a Little League meeting last fall and had some conversations and listened a lot. And then Jeff and I've talked, one of the things that we talk about is having great high school sports. Well, our baseball is at a struggle because we're missing an age group of kids that cannot, they go from Little League and have almost no place to go before they go to high school. And you always think, would we have a better high school program if we had a space in that spot to allow these kids to continue to get better and play on fields that, you can't ask a 12, 13-year-old kid to go from a little league field and try to pitch from a high school field.
They would do the traveling, right?
Oh, they did.
They did, but they still played, right? They would just do traveling or was it not an organized league because I know kids played all the way to high school.
They don't play in junior, do they?
We've been battling this challenge since my kids were playing baseball, and that's several years. We've always had that open spot where there's no little league to high school transition. And I fought that battle till they got out of baseball, and they left baseball.
Yeah, a lot of them
strictly went to football and or weightlifting, and because there's no place to play.
Yeah, or they do the traveling and then it's a small group and they take them out.
Traveling leagues back then. We didn't have wheels on the car.
Right. Yeah, and that's a small group. That's a small group that does that. But anyway,
and there's another piece just as more of information. They've come up with ways now like a pitching mound. They actually have portable pitching mounds. So you don't have to build a field just for one thing. For instance, Jeff had talked about, and he can go into more detail, but you can take that same field and have two different baseball spacing that you can have it for the shorter and the longer, and where you could use that field for multiple age groups instead of just using it for one.
Wiley has really nice portable pitching that they move around.
Is that not correct, Jeff?
Yeah, I really think you could configure it with, as Ken said, with the portable mound to where you can just have two sets of pegs, I guess, holes for the bases, and move them in and out depending on the age. Like, for example, on this field at 419, the one that's in the worst shape, it could be reconfigured to satisfy older kids. We just have to move the fences back a little bit. It needs to be graded. It has a pretty ugly lip off the back of the infield. The fences could be moved back 40 to 50 feet. Regrade the infield to where it has multiple base paths, so you could have some bases at 60 feet and then another set of pegs 10, 15 feet beyond that. It could be used for multiple age levels. The big one there is, like, when we were looking at it, when we were trying to get just some people together, is that expense of actually having to regrade that field back down because of the lip and physically move that fence back. I think that would require to move maybe the scoreboard. The right field, you just have to put a taller fence up, which isn't a big deal. I mean, that's just part of baseball. You may have a high fence in right field. But it could be done on 419. Some of it, you probably just need to demolish the concrete and re-terrace it, something like that. The terraces down the right field line would just need to be eliminated and smoothed out into a hill. But yeah, point being, you could use it for multiple age levels because of now the mound's not being built up. That's the big one, is the big mound. You can move it back, move it forward. It can be done. And there is some willingness amongst local people to work with that. We tried to get started last year. It ended up turning into just, kind of lost a little momentum. But there is a desire.
Okay, how could we get some dollar figures assigned to this, Jeff?
Actually, let me ask David Hall. He may have actually looked at some of those numbers before. There were some numbers floating around.
Okay.
So how do we want to move forward with parks? Just look at Newman for this year and kind of take Dr. Peak's advice and spread our efforts out over 3 years? Or do you want to baseball and equipment, or?
I'll chime in with,
You don't have to mute it. You can-
I like Dr. Peak's idea of allocating and having a program which this board could change that program at any time. That's the problem with saying we're going to do a 3, 5, 10, 15-year program. But we spent a lot of time. I think we should have an equally impressive playground right beside it. I'm not in favor of making Newman the only park in Sweetwater, but right now it's the best place to spend the money. So I would recommend we put that in action, that we move on, put new playground equipment there, and then come back and try to do more in the future.
Now I wondered if we could leave them.
Probably not. Yeah, if we did the all ability playground, because the new swing set was figured into that. But
Also, there will be a swing set.
yes.
Okay.
But they won't be how many swings will it have? I mean, we're getting into the details. I love those swings.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly how many, but they were really neat. They had a shade structure over them.
Yeah.
Individual, I just can't remember how many was in there. I don't have.
Maybe to be determined on the swings, right?
Well, I mean, we're flexible.
Yeah. Yeah, gotcha.
You know, kind of discuss, maybe we could form another committee.
Right.
And kind of see exactly what we wanted. Nail it down just like we did with Black Hat.
Shows about 8, and if this picture's right, I don't know. It shows about 8 swings, and it's covered.
The swings are covered?
Yes.
Cool.
That was the intent. Make them
It'd be cool.
There you go.
So we're good going forward with working with the city, coming back with whatever plan, but kind of asking that it's directed towards the Newman Park area.
Right. And then what about the Little League? Does y'all want to have a discussion about that? Little League parks?
Personally, I think that's a big long-term discussion, because there are some people that we've talked to that feel like taking your existing baseball fields and remanufacturing those and moving them accomplishes the same thing as the other did. And then you have another group that wants to do the new one out towards the interstate. So
who owns, the city owns the baseball
Yes.
fields? I mean, is there a way that the county could be brought in as a owner and a partner for baseball? Is that another can of worms too? I mean, I don't know. It seems like to me that might be an idea.
it happens in other counties, but it hasn't happened in Nolan County.
Ken, perhaps this is a time that we can truly be the seed to a thought. And what if we just carved out $20,000 in the budget and allow that to be the seed money to allow Jeff and David or whoever else is in that committee to take that resource and move forward with a change and let it be at that.
I mean, again, remember, this is not our park. So I would sure hope that the owners of the park, which would be the city of Sweetwater, would be the one that kind of runs that side of it. Russell, what kind of thoughts do you have on that?
I'm mixed on the
Yeah.
because, you know, we put a whole bunch of money into this one field, particular field, and then we end up getting a complex later. We don't use these fields, but we wasted that money. I'm also concerned about Title IX issues as far as you do something for the baseball, the softballers, you haven't done anything for them. Are they going to start coming to for equal? I'm sure they probably feel the same way about their fields.
But aren't the softball fields owned by the school?
They are. They currently use Brady and Jones.
Right.
Because the school won't let them use the Jerry Farmers complex, basically.
Right.
And just to, provide a little more insight, the reason why I even recommend that is the thing that caught my attention in Jeff's report is the fact that he said people from out of town. And that's an area that we can make our first impression upon. So that's why I even recommended that approach.
And just kind of a recap from last meeting, we've already began. In fact, David's gave us information on the parks in Abilene. We'll be reaching out. We just got tied up on some other things. I've talked with Colorado City. We're working with Big Springs. We're going to be working with Snyder on how they handle some things. For instance, Colorado City has all those new parks, and their economic development is in charge of them, believe it or not. But they don't do anything with them. They haven't had tournaments there other than a couple of local games. That's the only thing they've done with all the investment they've put in. Big Springs, it came right now. I mean, my daughters play a lot of travel ball, and they do not play in Big Springs at all. They go to Lubbock, they go to Abilene, they go to Dallas, they go to all the other places. But part of it, it just seems like that just because you build a nice field, if you don't have the infrastructure behind it, of the maintenance and the drive, like Brownwood actually funds a person through their chamber, city, and EDC, I believe it is, that is the no, this is the marketing person. They actually go out there and try to bring those events into town.
And it's also kind of being too late to the party too, right? I mean, there are so many of these complexes too.
There are a lot of them around, yes. And from personal experience, I mean, my daughter, when they did a tournament in Snyder, I mean, they'll have 2 tournaments a year. She puts in about 40 hours over a 3-day weekend. And it's just hard to get people to come out and be willing to help host it. You can have the best field there is, but if you don't have the infrastructure of people hosting it, cleaning it, doing all those things, it makes it tough.
Is that it from parks? Does anybody else have any comments, or maybe 3-year phase and start with Newman? Last time, Russell brought up a feasibility study. Is that in interest of anyone? And this would be to kind of what Ken said, that y'all directed us to call around and kind of find out how the other surrounding sports complexes are doing, and see if it's in our interest to go forward with the feasibility study of our sports complex. So that might be something we want to explore a little more, and like Ken and I do a little more research and kind of talk with surrounding communities more before we go forward on that, or just
You want to go around the room?
anyone has anyone to add?
I'm not in favor of a study on this. That's me. Joseph, or go ahead, Dr. Pete.
You're talking about a multi-million-dollar expenditure, Russell? $9 million? Yeah.
And this is for a study. to talk
Well,
about. We've already-
that's for the complex, $9 to
Right,
$12
right,
million
right. I mean-
but we're discussing the study.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, you would have to have so many pieces fall into place to make something that big successful. I mean, you know, there's you got to market it. Is the sports market already saturated? You know, where are you going to get the property? Who's going to run it? It's a big bite, and you obviously you're looking at, you know, you're going to have to fund that with bonds for expenditure of that big. Of course, the city could do that, but the MDD can do that too. But that's still a huge, huge step. I think it's a pretty big gamble.
The feasibility study or the project?
The project.
Sure.
Yeah,
It's a big
now,
gamble.
not the feasibility study, no, but, you know, I'm thinking a little farther down the road. It's kind of where my thoughts are. I don't have a problem with taking a look at it and continuing to investigate it.
But do you want to spend $20,000 or was it 20?
25.
$25,000 on a study to see whether we want to look at it? That's what they want to know. We've already done a $50,000 master parks plan
You know,
that looked at it and got opinions from everybody about what they wanted and, you know.
And I would say we're putting that to really good use. It was $30,000 from the chamber that funded it, wasn't it, Russell? So it wasn't the city.
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
right. But so it was total 30?
Total 30.
Oh,
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
sorry. Okay.
That's fine.
My mistake.
I think what
I would say yes to spending the money on the feasibility study, because if it pans out, and like I said, everything fell into place, it would be a huge, huge plus for the city, as far as, you know, things for the kids to do here, plus the potential of bringing in people from outside, sales tax, hotel motel tax, feeds into the retail side as far as making it attractive for restaurants. And I think it's worth taking a look at. So I'm wondering.
in my opinion, what you're doing by, if you get to the point past the feasibility study, let's just say it's feasible and the board decides to go forward with it, the council decides to go forward with the project, what you're doing at that point is you're creating another sector, another economic sector, sports and entertainment. So further diversifying our community, and then, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing for the council to do, not a bad thing for the MDD to do. There's very few opportunities to create sectors, do something that creates an economic sector in a community. And this is an opportunity to do just that here before us. So are we going to look into it, spend the $25,000 or $30,000 to see if it's feasible or not? And if it's not, you don't go forward. If it is, then maybe you do.
So I guess I'm confused about what is a feasibility study, because the master parks plan, they obviously thought it was feasible that we could pass a $9 million bond and that we could support it and have it. So are these people going to tell us the very same thing? I mean, I'm just
It's
asking,
more
I don't
detail.
really understand who determines whether it's feasible, because bottom line is that bond issue going to pass, and we've got schools that need to be replaced. You
Sure.
know, big time need to be replaced. So I don't know. There's a limited tax base to support all this.
I understand that.
Yeah, so I just don't know. I don't know what you put first, you know, the cart or the horse. I don't know, but
Here, let me study too, we can figure out exactly what we need. You know, it's just like Jeff is saying, you know, baseball fields. And it's been acknowledged that the need for both baseball and softball need new facilities. So this feasibility study can find out exactly who else is going to come to this and how big do we actually need? Do we need 4 softball fields? Do we need 4 baseball fields? Do we just need 2? You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So it
I
can
understand.
determine a lot of, but there's a lot of information. It's just like a spider web. Once you start looking into this information, you got to get to the files to see how big we need, who's going to use
It
it.
just, you know, to me, the need and the ability to fund it don't always match up. And the master parks plan that they put out for us had so many unattainable things, in my opinion, for the tax base that we have and the people that are going to vote. you know, for a bond issue and they see what it's going to do to their property taxes. That to me, a feasibility study, in my opinion, it's just a waste of money if it is not something that can be practically attained. And I'd rather see the $25,000 or $30,000 go into fixing the concrete on these baseball fields or something. That's just my personal opinion, but.
I think it'd be good money put to use. Like I said, I think the park master plan just only revealed the need, and there was nothing that was addressed. Sure, the complex that they drew up was probably a pipe dream, maybe, if you will. And I say, do we need that? Can we make it to where it will sustain itself? You know, can we market it? Do we have the staff to do this? Who's going to do that? So, you know, all this information that we need to know to come to but it will give us assurance that, you know, once we start putting money towards this, then hey, we're going to be guaranteed, or we're going to have somewhat of a guarantee to do this.
The Parks Master Plan really is more of a 30,000-foot view of things. The feasibility study is a ground level report saying it's feasible. There's opportunity here. We've done the studies. We know what's going on in other cities. There's a need, there's a void yet to fill, and that void could be filled by Sweetwater building this kind of a place.
And they would
area.
determine whether the funding could happen, because that's the big deal.
It's always money.
It's always money, and we just have such a limited amount of it. What does everybody else think? Russ? and
Everybody
Gil
has a
and-
limited amount of money though.
Yeah, that's true.
Every city, big or small.
You're right. That's true. Russ, opinion?
And I remember growing up, and maybe some other people in this room, but Sweetwater used to host state baseball tournaments here. And those two parks were, you know, really nice back in the day. It's a shame that we can't do stuff like that anymore. I don't know. I don't know if you're throwing good money after bad, or but if you, I can go either way, but I'm kind of leaning towards going ahead and doing the feasibility study.
Okay.
If you don't do it, you never know.
You know, and if we chose to do a feasibility study, you know, as David said, you got a 30,000 foot of the park plan. You do the feasibility, say, here's what we want out of this. We want to know baseball, softball, whether or not we're the right community, whether or not we're the right location, and not talk about playground equipment, anything else, just centered in on those two arenas.
Will they only look at whether or not to build a sports complex, or will they look at possible upgrades to our existing infrastructure and all? They're only going to look at a sports complex, though.
I think that would be our decision, or city decision, whoever it is, to say direct, here's what we want. We want to look at exactly what we have right now. Option one is, could we take what we have now and upgrade it to make what we need? Because, you know, some of the thought is if you rebuilt what we have and build one new park to get that junior high side, then you've got enough enough fields. It doesn't address softball though.
That would be a question, because I
Right.
think that the way it was presented, it was only a feasibility study for the sports complex. So, Gil, did you have a comment?
If we narrow the focus, does that reduce the cost? If we narrow the focus down on the feasibility study, does that reduce the cost?
I doubt it personally, because you're asking for more information in a smaller arena instead of the big generic stuff.
Well, I think what Russ said really mirrors my thoughts. I could go either way, but I'd hate to think we're missing an opportunity by not spending a few dollars. And this is truly just a few dollars in comparison to what we talk about annually. So with that said, I guess I lied. I'm more leaning towards doing it.
Okay. And Joseph, thank you, Gil.
A very big topic. Obviously, if there was any opportunity to moving forward with the project, I think it would be good to have a feasibility study. But I'm just curious, in our existing master plan, does it mention these types of complexes in that? Is it part of the community's overall plan? And what thoughts does the city have as far as financially is it even remotely possible with the passing of a bond at this level?
It was a big part of the, a lot of support from the citizens for this type of a project. Joseph, it was a big part, a big piece of the park master plan and the discussions we had with the consultants several years ago when they put that together for us. Now, as far as the funding, we're not going to get anything done without money. There's several options on how to do that. General obligation bonds, go ask the voters to see whether or not they vote up or down on a project of that magnitude. The council could issue certificates of obligation, which do not require a vote, but that's an option that they have. I would figure that they would want to put it out to the voters, and I would recommend that. But just going over options right now, COs are an option that the council would have. Typically, in my experience in Abilene, the nonprofit you'd create a nonprofit group, a youth sports group, typically a nonprofit that would run the program once you get the facilities built. You'd have an executive director that would be in charge, similar to what they have in, I think Brownwood is the city that was named, in charge of bringing in the tournaments and marketing the facility and those types of things. All of that would be a part of the feasibility study once you get it built, or I'm sorry, once you figure that it's feasible based on population information and demographics and number of tournaments within the region and those kinds of things. Then you move on to step 2, how do you fund it? And then they would tell us these are the options for the money side of things. And then once it's built, here's how you run it. Here's kind of the organizational chart of who you need to be in charge of what to make this a successful endeavor. So the feasibility study is kind of, in my mind, those 3 or 4 parts that would tell us from beginning to end, okay, if it's feasible, this is how you do it. Did I answer your question, sir?
I think so. Carolyn, I could go either way on this. I mean, I think if it's something very important to the community and we could in some way help in that regards, that might be the best first step. I just don't have the knowledge of the overall master plan that David was mentioning, but based on his comments, I could go with it.
Okay, thank you. I just would like a definition of feasible. That's just my question. What does feasible mean? Is it something that we can truly accomplish and do? Or is it something that somebody thinks, yeah, if you pass a bond issue, you can do it? You know, I want somebody to tell us, is that bond issue going to pass? Or do we need to level middle school and build a new middle school instead if we're going to pass a bond issue for that kind of money? So that's just my opinion, but I've already said it. So, okay, so I think you have direction on that, Misha.
A comprehensive plan.
Okay. So go ahead. You want to explain that?
Yeah. So comprehensive, I'll let Dana kind of, let me go back. Okay, hang on. Let me go back to my notes.
Well, if you remember, part of that comprehensive plan is best use of land in directing certain parts of the, our city to have housing, to have commercial, to have all those type of things. Also, if I remember right, Dana, you were also talking about addressing code enforcement and having the proper code enforcement in place to be able to use the best use of our property. And that plan was a combination of the city and an outside firm coming together to do that.
So I'll just read a quick summary. The comprehensive plan will identify community issues and concerns and include policy statements, goals, objectives, guidelines, maps, and graphics. It will serve as a working framework for development of future land use and public policy. It would help us kind of maybe an economic development direction, somewhat code enforcement where our code enforcement lacks. It would maintain a collaborative and respectful relationship within the community and our surrounding neighbors and establish policies and priorities that the community views.
All right, we'll just go around again on this. If anybody has any questions, Joseph, you want to start with you, or who wants to be first?
Based on what I had remember the conversation being, I think this is a city, I think we will be able to be a partner with the city and project by project. And in regards to the plan, I think that's a city action and a city expense and a city goal. I think we should let that be in the power of the council.
Thank you. Gil, same. Okay. Russ?
Same.
Okay. Dr. Peak?
I would think it's a worthwhile partnership between the MDD and the city. Some of the things that we're embarking on right now, both from the MDD and some action that the city is going to be taking, are going to have really, really long-term ramifications for our community in the future. And I think the development of comprehensive plan falls right in there. David, correct me, the city is looking, if it funds itself, at being a 2-year project?
Over 2 fiscal years, yes, sir.
Okay, all right. And it could be accomplished in 1 year with MDD assistance?
I believe so.
Okay. So, and I sit up here too. So I like to kind of support the city and the MDD all at the same time. So I think it's a worthwhile expenditure.
Thank you. Okay. I'm not in favor of it.
Okay, demolition. I know that y'all have focused on the corridors and stuff, but at the last meeting, it was kind of brought to everyone's attention that some of the dilapidated structures around our schools or in parks are very much an eyesore, and we have a lot of traffic that comes to football games and various activities at our schools, and just kind of possibly maybe look at around the schools, expanding our boundaries, or do we want to stick specifically to the corridors and nothing else?
Again, if you remember that meeting, we have the priority 1, I guess you could call, would be the 5 corridor road you have. And what we've kind of talked about is a second priority, which would be centered around public buildings, which would be your schools and your parks. Now, if I remember right, the discussion around that kind of directed us to stay on the first priority at this time. And that would be something that could be looked at down the line, but we need to make more headway on the first priority than skipping up and going to the second priority. Was that kind of a consensus?
That's my feelings.
That's
We
what
got plenty
Yeah.
to do on the corridor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, not good, bad, or indifferent. We're just trying to make sure that we head the direction you guys want us to head.
I think we need to learn how to control the first priority before we try to add to that priority. So that's exactly what you just said.
That was kind of all the discussion points. Russ mentioned something about supporting our local law enforcement as feedback and just kind of finding ways to do that. Would anybody else be interested in finding various ways we could show our local law enforcement that we support them? And I don't know how we would do it, or if Russ has any ideas.
Well, and I think my concern there also was, our quality of life challenge, and sometimes I feel that maybe certain things don't get taken care of from a law enforcement point of view or from a citizen's concern. I've got people that behind my business over there that they were running drugs out of it, and we would call police. No, can't really do much. No one's really told why, but. And I know if it's happening in my place, it's happening all over, and I know we all know it's happening.
Russ, who told you that? I need a name. Who said they couldn't do much?
I don't know, or police chief.
Okay.
I'm on good terms with it.
Yeah.
But,
Well, he's no longer with us, I guess.
And so maybe, and that being said, maybe this is a good time to whoever that next person's going to be, that they understand, hey, this is what some of the challenges are, and you can't just keep kicking the can down the road. You know, if people are thinking about coming to Sweetwater and they hear stuff like what we're talking about here, how does that affect the decision to relocate here for a high-paying job or for a business opportunity? So, but at the same time, with all the other stuff going on in the country with law enforcement, what can we do to, hey, we've got your back, how can we improve their ability to do their job to help our communities feel safer?
Well, I don't want to overstate or just state the obvious, but don't we do that with our tax dollars and providing them with the equipment, the training, the knowledge to do their job that they chose to do as a profession?
Yep.
Does that not qualify?
I agree, but how can we
Increase that? How can we
get
increase
more
that?
bang for a buck maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
Are the police, are their hands truly tied when they go out on a call and run up against a drug situation or a guy on a bicycle riding in the lane of traffic with no lights or no reflectors and he's got a backpack, and, we don't know what he's doing.
Exercise.
I don't know, just.
I'll fly my thin blue line flag for you all next week.
Well, and I know sometimes we take light of some of this stuff, not the actual stuff itself, but I think one of the things that we struggle with as staff is, MDD has opened the floodgates to what we can and can't do. And I think we've talked about it before, we had this much that we could do as a type A, and now we can do that, plus we can do all this other stuff. What all can an MDD actually get done? And if we spread ourselves so thin, are we going to do justice to any one of them?
And to me, a consulting effort on a drug, situation or something like that might be something to consider,
We don't have a DARE program in similar schools anymore. We used to.
and that was huge, yeah. You have it in the other schools, but not Sweetwater, correct? Yeah.
And you have the drug court now with,
And the drug court, that's a very positive thing with Judge Harrison, and that effort is very, very good. So, in my opinion. But yeah, maybe the DARE program might be, I don't know, something to explore as a way to.
Okay.
Hey, Ken, can I throw another topic out for quick discussion?
please do.
One of the wish list items that I had was access to communication, specifically data, with kids working from home. When I saw the number of people driving their children to Sutherland's to connect to a public Wi-Fi so that they could do their homework, was honestly really shocking to me. And I know that this is getting off topic, but one of the ways that we could truly increase quality of life for many, many folks is figure out somehow to put a partnership together to bring high quality data options to this community and allow our families not to have to drive in a vehicle to somewhere to access public Wi-Fi. I'll throw it out for comments.
And I mean, that affects economic development too. And as we've talked about over the last years of trying to pull people from the metroplexes of the world into the rural communities, you can work from home only if you have a high-speed internet access. There is a group called Connect Texas that we've started to work with just a little bit that is actually doing a mapping. Texas is one of the worst states in the United States for mapping of its connectivity throughout the state. So this Connect Texas is getting some grants, getting private funding that is actually working to put together maps to be able to show. And if you look at Nolan County, even the middle section of Sweetwater is pretty good, but other than that, it's really spotty throughout the whole county. Schools even addressing that with this online learning. They've talked about taking school vehicles and buses, parking them in neighborhoods to have hot spots. Because you tell a kid if they don't feel safe to come to school, you do it at home, but yet if you don't have access at home, then how do you take care of that?
Exactly.
So
Ken,
connectivity is a big thing.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. And if you look at housing, you know, this falls hand in hand. So if we want to increase population by offering housing options and now the data option, you've got people that can come and live in our community, spend their dollars in our community, pay their taxes in our community, and work for a major accounting firm in Dallas or a marketing firm in New York or wherever. I just find that this could be a super way for us to truly make a positive impact on our community.
And
How do we explore that?
I mean, we can begin the conversation with Connected Nation. I mean, we've already talked to them a little bit. They're fairly new. It's only been less than a year that they've been pretty heavy in our part of the country. Jennifer Harris is their executive director for Texas. We can visit with them and just see what kind of process and what kind of time frame it takes to be able to do a study for a certain area and find out what's available, what's not available. We know that, you know, you got AT&T and you've got Dish and you've got Suddenlink and a few of those. You get outside city limits, that drops down quite rapidly. Housing additions sometimes have struggles getting that. But I think, you know, part of our other concern is on the school side is some of the places that don't have access, it's not because the access isn't available, it's a choice. It's a financial choice, of course, but it's still a choice that there is access available. They, for whatever reason, chose not to connect to that access. Not every place, by no means.
Okay. Thank you.
No matter how good you make it, if they choose not to.
Yeah, you know, it still can be a costly issue, and it still can be, but you know, hopefully you would get to a point where you would make it where it is available, and then you have to deal with those type of issues on the side. But we'll be glad to talk with Connected Nation and just see what kind of process we could work with to expand this opportunity in Sweetwater.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, and thanks for bringing that up, Joseph.
Oh, thank you.
I think kind of everything that we were uncertain of and needed a little direction on, y'all have given us at least enough to come up with a program of work and going forward. So I guess the next thing would be to approve the budget with any adjustments that were suggested.
Do we have any adjustments beyond increasing the rental payment to the chamber?
That we have adjustments on adding in an estimated, an estimation on the other line items in the legal section.
But that was actually included.
That was just splitting out.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so just the $10,000 is all. Yeah. Okay.
I move approval of the budget with the one change to include increasing the rent payment to the Chamber of Commerce to $2,000 per month.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's moved and seconded that we approve the SEED MDD 2021 fiscal year budget with one modification as stated. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no.
Aye.
The ayes have it and the motion is adopted. Okay, so we, reports next, Ken?
Yeah, we got two short reports, then we'll need to go into closed session.
Okay.
Mine's real fast. I submitted a community development award or an application for Texas Economic Development Council Community Award. And what I did it over was the splash pad, and everyone's from the city to the engineering firm to rain services and local vendors and everyone that was involved, and just kind of how it was everyone was able to come together, and so it should be back to them.
Wow. In your spare time, Misha. Goodness gracious. Thank you for doing that. That's great.
And I'm on that committee, but I have to not vote. They said you could, just put, one said you just don't vote for you. And I said, okay, I'm not going to vote for anybody else, and we'll actually get more points that way. No, I guess I can't do that.
And I did want to say that the chamber's going to say thank you note for sponsoring new teachers.
Okay.
So, and that was nice.
Thank you.
I've got just two quick things before we go into executive session, and both of them are with Jeff Allen. We talked about two different things. I think over the last couple of months, we've been concerned about the liability of us doing projects with the city before there's all the transfer and all that type of stuff. So Jeff's going to kind of talk a little bit about that. And then the other piece is that we're working on a possible blanket resolution that could be used between the city and SEED. And of course, the city side will have to look at it and approve it too. But we're just talking about possibly, since any project we do is going to be more than likely owned by the city, and all we're going to do is fund parts of it. So if we had a resolution each year that would cover any projects we did with the city that year, we wouldn't have to go through some of this other stuff. Any other projects that we did would still have to have a resolution to do what we're trying to do, because each one would stand on its own. But we're just at least talking about that to where we don't have to come up with a brand new one every time we try to do a project, and it makes us more comfortable with what we're moving forward. But Jeff, you don't mind just kind of hitting that potential liability that you sent me?
Yeah, sure. So as far as it goes for y'all, there's being now in the MDD political subdivision of the city and all that. So what we have is going to be some basic governmental and sovereign immunity, same kind of thing that the city's going to have. The only places where we will have liability, or at least primarily, is going to be through the Tort Claims Act, which will only get triggered if we own real or personal property. There's another avenue of it if we through vehicles and things like that. We don't really have any vehicles or have any people driving around or doing those sorts of things. So the likelihood of that happening is pretty narrow. So our avenues for liability would be in any property that SEED owned, that was real property, land, those sorts of things, or personal property. Within the last couple of years, about the only real property we've owned has been the locomotive, which would have been an avenue for potential liability, or any land that the corporation, the prior corporation, would have owned. Really, the opportunities for there to be real liability are pretty slim. Even within the context of that Tort Claims Act, in a nutshell, you're only going to be open to actual damages. There's not going to be any of those consequential or exceptional damage, exponential damages or anything like that, primarily because the state has not waived those damages. So you would only be covering anything that harm happened specifically, and that harm would have to happen related specifically to the property. So that's where we get into a situation where we don't have just a lot of liability in what we do as SEED. There's not, hypothetically, if we owned the which we don't, but if we did own the splash pad, if it was poorly maintained or something and broke and harmed a child, something like that, you could be liable for the actual injury to the child. But, if somebody climbs out on it and uses it in a way that they're not supposed to, that's not something that we would have there. It would have to be the actual item would have to be the cause of the injury. So it's pretty narrow. And it's something that we can control. Of course, on the other end would be contracts. We are going to be liable for contracts the same as a normal party. So if we enter into a contract and breach it, we would be liable for a breach of that. But again, those are pretty narrow circumstances in which we actually enter a contract that requires a performance from SEED or from the MDD that is more than just paying an incentive. And that's why we're pretty careful with the incentive agreements saying exactly what we're going to do. And all that would remain in y'all's discretion as the board. So really, we're in pretty good shape as far as protecting ourselves. What Ken had mentioned as far as a resolution, what we had talked about was just kind of establishing a policy of the SEED board of that in y'all's discretion that you chip, because you're through the statute, through the authorizing statute, you're allowed to own property. It's one of the things that you can do. So what the resolution would essentially do is that it's not our intent when we're providing money that we're taking any ownership interest in it. So if we're providing money to the SEED to purchase or to the city to purchase property or some other organization to purchase property, essentially what we would do would be to reference that resolution saying pursuant to resolution 2021-001, we're granting this money. And in that resolution, essentially what we're saying is SEED is not taking any ownership in that property. We're just providing funds. That would at least give some paper trail going back, kind of the same as what we did with the splash pad. That's kind of it in the nutshell. What we would do to limit our liability is essentially to avoid owning anything. That sounds a little bit simple, but that's what it is. If we don't own it, we don't have a liability under current statutes because we're protected by certain immunities.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions?
Why are we talking about this? Is there an issue that's arose? Or is this just more of an update?
It's more of an update, but it came back because of the issue with the splash pad, and we supplied funds, was transferred. It looked as if, and again, I'm not the legal guy, but we owned the equipment and then had to transfer the equipment to the city. And what liabilities we had if we were the owner of the equipment.
And Jeff, all you're saying is that going forth, I mean, these types of transactions between the SEED and the city, you'll just document in your resolution that it is funding purposes only, and we never take possession of an asset.
Right. Yeah. And that's essentially what we were doing with the splash pad too. And us in partnership with the city, we just want to make sure we've got those two things flowing, because ultimately we are a political subdivision of the city anyway. So it's in all of our best interest to avoid those sorts of liabilities.
Thank you.
If there's no questions on that, that's my report.
Okay. So the next item is 7, into closed session. So we need a motion to.
So moved.
Okay. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Okay, we will enter into closed session.
We'll take a little break.
Yep.
Well, David, how is Brian doing?
He's doing good. He's doing good. Getting a taste of it now.
I'll bet he is. He gets set on your side of the table and he's thinking, man, I wish I wouldn't give him such a hard time. He will. He was in I used to teach a Texas Tech Economic Development 101 for that program, and that was the one he missed that year.
This conference will now be recorded.
Monday, August the 17th, 2020, and it's 1:11 p.m. And we are leaving a closed session to reconvene into regular session.
Now we have item number 4B that we need to actually go into.
Board to consider.
Oh,
right.
Vote on the motion.
I'm sorry. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion is carried. We are now in regular session. Thank you, Dr. Pete. So now are we ready to move to item 4B? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Board to review and consider approving payment of accounts payable.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the accounts payable. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The ayes have it, and the motion is carried. Anything else? Okay.
What? Somebody can make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, so moved. Sorry.
Second.
All right.
So moved.
All in favor? Thank y'all.
Well, that was my responsibility.
Good marathon.
We'll try to